your queries on issues of research, academic issues, poverty linked, his research linked, and healthcare linked in the country. And please don't try to, again, request and appeal to all of you who will have thousands of questions. Don't try to transgress to bigger political and all those issues, which I think he's having all through the day since he landed in this country. So with that, I would really open this forum and would request that each of you please come with one question, and that would be doing justice to so many of you sitting here. So I think that would be good. And maybe, pardon me if I'm coming forth with a whip in my hand to stop you. Because we have to do it. We have got time for 45 minutes from now on. So maybe one question to start with.
I just want to, I'm not research related, but basically in the backdrop of this morning's meeting with the Prime Minister, there's been so much of to and fro. You've seen, you've been critical of the Indian economy. So how did it go? Can you just tell us your opening statement?
So the Prime Minister, I'm going to say this, and I'm going to take no more questions on this. Prime Minister started by cracking a joke about how the media is trying to trap me to say anti-Modi things. He's been watching the TV, he's been watching you guys, and he knows what you're trying to do. So I think stop.
So you had a good cordial meeting?
Yes. But
I have a question regarding West Bengal. How do you think, I'm Gautam from Aishomai, how do you think, what are the steps should be needed to better job opportunity and rural distress, to overcome this rural distress?
I have no idea. I don't. I think I take pride in the fact that I'm happy to say I have no idea about many things. I have no idea.
Hi, I'm Maitri from the Hindu Business Line. My question is surrounding the rural healthcare delivery and what can we do to make it better. Two issues that we face is one, lack of manpower or lack of trained manpower. Second being the budget, the healthcare budget. So in your research, if you could comment.
Let me say one thing, which is that, in fact, we have one of the highest share of private expenditure. So the healthcare budget is not at the margin. People are spending money. The question is more, are they spending the money on the right things? And are they getting value for that money? And that's what we're trying to fix. You don't seem happy with that answer.
So would you please let us know the kind of research that you put in over the years along with the collaboration, which is shedding more light on the kind of problems we have and how we can solve them?
I did answer that maybe too briefly, but what I was trying to say is that I think the big question is, when people spend lots of money, are they spending the money on the right thing? And there the quality of the healthcare they're getting is the key issue. And the research we've been doing for 20 years now on healthcare suggests that a big concern is that they are not getting value for money.
What should be done?
Oh, lots of things. One of the things the topic of today's seminar was what should be done. And I'm going to say a little bit and let maybe Dr. Chaudhary, if he wants to add to that. What we're trying to achieve, one of the things is take the people who are practicing healthcare, who are not necessarily trained a lot, and train them more with the idea that they are providing healthcare. We can't deny their existence. They may not have an MBBS degree, but they are providing healthcare. You have to somehow recognize their existence, and you have to get them so that they can be frontline workers.
Professor Banerjee, 2010 সাল থেকে আপনারা লিভার ফাউন্ডেশনের সঙ্গে গ্রামীণ স্বাস্থ্যসেবা কেন্দ্রের ট্রেনিং দিচ্ছেন, যেটা
I think Gautam, I know Gautam. So he's from Calcutta. You tell in English so that other people can also comprehend. Yeah.
Yes.
You are giving training to the so-called WAC doctor or গ্রামীণ স্বাস্থ্যসেবা, which is under serious criticism. Would you please tell me how would you try to implement the project so that the rural healthcare system will get benefited out of this?
I mean, I don't think I'm saying. I think already answered that question, which is that I think you can either deny that they exist, and given that most of the healthcare is provided by them, you can then bear the consequences, or you can actually recognize their existence, and then you can actually regulate them, you can train them, you can require standards of quality. আপনি অনেক বলেছেন আর আরেকজনকে বলতে
Yesterday you said that what worries you the quality of education. So are you going to do anything like what Professor Sen did after getting Nobel Prize? Do you have any idea on that?
No, I haven't thought about it.
And what is the, I mean, when you are worried about this quality of education, what is your...
I've done 25 years of research on it. I'm worried about it. I've already paid my dues a little bit to it. And we're still working on it. We still try, a very large part of my own work in India is on education, trying to improve the quality of teaching. And most of those are with Pratham, and many of them are published. You can look it up. It's very much, one of the things that the Nobel Prize Committee recognized is that body of work on education in India.
Professor Banerjee, there is a program in West Bengal called Kanyasri.
I don't know enough about it.
So there is a direct cash transfer to the girl child to continue their studies up to 12 and then...
I don't know enough about this. I'm not going to speak. I reserve the right to be ignorant about things and not answer them. I'm not supposed to be the person who knows everything. I'm going to insist that that's important. We should speak about what we know and not just use this as an opportunity to air opinions about everything.
Okay, thank you.
Professor Banerjee, something from
I think you've asked. I'm going to let somebody else ask. You did. I'm not that.
भारतीय अर्थव्यवस्था से आप संतुष्ट हैं और क्या
English में पूछिए.
You are happy with Indian economy and what you have been with PM?
I won't answer that. Ask a question that's more specific than that.
I at the very outset, I tried to, because this was really all through the day we had stormed our brains, and Abhijit has contributed tremendously. So it would be great if you use this opportunity for, healthcare planning in the country, rural healthcare delivery in focus, or his areas of research, which all of you know, you must have done your homework on this. And so please come forth with some information which would use your, copy also. Go ahead.
So what's your opinion about Ayushman Bharat program?
I think it's a very needed, it does something very important, which is it deals with the fact that healthcare expenses wipe families out. And it does something very important there. I think it's something that we need. We need to find ways so that families don't lose all their assets when somebody in the family gets sick. So I think it serves a very important gap in our economic structure.
So what was your recommendation from today's meeting about the healthcare report? What did you
It's not the kind of meeting that has a recommendation, but it was a meeting which was very fruitful. I thought I learnt a lot, and I think it was starting a conversation with the Niti Aayog in particular and with ICMR on what do you do about this world where there's enormous amount of kind of healthcare that's provided outside the formal healthcare system. So that's what this conversation was about. Most healthcare, like majority, much more than a majority of healthcare is provided by people who are not recognized as healthcare providers. What do you do in that world? That's the question.
How can we develop the rural health problems? What's your suggestion? I'm Indrani from Calcutta.
I don't understand the
How
question.
can we develop our rural health problems?
Problems.
What's your suggestion, sir?
Yeah, there are so many issues. Indrani, can you be a bit more specific for him to answer?
Humanitarian problem and lots of women's problems we face in India, sir.
Look, again, I don't have anything particularly useful to say about that. I mean, I think we're all struggling with this problem that, there is Dr. Paul, who was speaking here an hour ago, was making the point that behavior change is very important because, for example, the exclusive breastfeeding rates, which are critical for our children, is only 50%. So I think we have to somehow figure out ways to get women who are critical agents in this to be more full participants in this program of making our children and our country more healthy.
Professor Banerjee, are you happy with the way we are progressing on tackling malnutrition and stunting in the country?
This is one of these classic glass half full, half empty. For a long time, we had plateaued completely. And now it's starting to improve. We see the improvement. Is it fast enough? No. Is it still better news than we had like 5-7 years ago? The answer is yes.
Professor Banerjee.
Do you want to speak on the bank crisis?
I was pointing to him.
Professor Banerjee, I have two small questions for you. First thing, have you interacted with ICMR? And the second thing, have you suggested them something for the future researches?
So they were part of this meeting. We had a good interaction, and we're hoping we'll build a research partnership between JPAL, which is our organization, and ICMR.
So this is Bhaskacharya from Capital TV. Have you already suggested any sort of your ideas to develop improve the human development index practically, and secondly, to combat the present scenario, which may not be very good economic scenario, especially in India?
I'm not. I think I haven't done anything. Let me answer half your question, which is I have no contribution to the Human Development Index. I think it's fine without my contribution. It's useful, and I don't want to answer that. I think that's not today's subject. I mean, I don't know what you mean. I spend a huge amount of my life trying to do things that are not theoretical based. In fact, if you look at what I'm getting a prize for, it is the opposite of theoretical based. But I can't defend myself any more than that.
Yeah, as one of his co-workers, let me mention. I just want to add. We at Liver Foundation West Bengal, we had been working together with Abhijit and J-Paul. So it had been a pleasure and learning for us to see the way he used to do homework, used to interact, used to sit on the doorstep of the informal care providers whom we are training and all. So it's onus on us to correct this, that he is absolutely reverse of what a theoretical scientist or a theoretical economist is supposed to be, and that's from our personal experience in West Bengal at least, and that he had done in other areas also.
It's very kind. Yeah.
Himanshu from NDTV. One small question, sir. The most important question for us is the slowdown of the economy. How do you
Can we not talk about this? I've spent endless days talking about this.
But we have not
if you listen to the number of times I've said something about it, I think people are bored. Let's stick to the topic of what's happening on the ground. I don't want to talk about this.
I just want.
I'm Jordan from Madhapur newspaper. It's published from Kerala. I would like to get some regarding that. You have cooperated with the Kerala government with the Ardhram mission project, and at that time you have some unpleasant experience you have got.
I didn't have any unpleasant experience. It didn't go anywhere, but that's often the case. There are all kinds of constraints. I wouldn't say it was unpleasant. It was pleasant actually. Everybody we talked to was very generous and kind. It just sometimes there are constraints and it didn't go anywhere.
Are you ready to cooperate with again?
Sure. I always say anybody comes to us with a problem that's actually important, and for the lives of the poor. That's our job. We cooperate. You've already had a chance. Yeah, I guess if there's no one else.
I basically want to, this is a big movement and a proud movement for you all in the random controlled trials that you do. But there are also certain critiques of it. Do you believe this is the best way forward, or is there, to your critics who are saying that it's not, most in the, how do you respond to them, and what's your kind of response you want to give?
I'm going to give the response that everything is only relative to the question you want to answer. If you want to know whether training some rural healthcare providers improves healthcare, you better do a randomized control trial. If you want to know what the monetary policy should be for a country, don't do a randomized control trial.
You are a proud pride of whole world, Bengal and Bengal. So what you want to contribute?
Carrying all this weight.
What you want to contribute for the state of West Bengal?
I say, if we are asked to do something that's useful, we almost never say no. Jepal is always willing to go try it out, try to find ways to work with governments. We worked with West Bengal government, with Dr. Chaudhary, and we will continue to do so, and we'll work with other governments. We don't go and just generally deliver wisdom. I don't have wisdom. If you ask me a specific question, I might know something. I'm happy to use it always.
Sir, do you want to speak on the banking crisis going on, because in the public sector banks especially, what is the...
Okay, let me speak a little bit about it, because at least it's something I have done lots of research on. So I think the banking crisis is frightening. I think we should worry about it a lot, because we see it a repeated pattern where, first the bank is fine, and suddenly it's a problem, a big problem. And that's a sign of the fact that balance sheets are somehow, we're not picking up enough information. I feel like we should be somehow vigilant about this not happening, the surprise that suddenly we get this, this bank is suddenly completely unable to meet payments. That shouldn't happen. We should be able to stop it way ahead of time. I think that is important. We need important and aggressive changes there.
Mr. Banerjee, I'm sorry I asked a question again, but sir, we would really be obliged if you could share some anecdotes from your field visits, and are there any stories that changed your perspective?
So many. So many. In a sense, we wrote a whole book with that. It was a book called Poor Economics. We wrote many years ago. It's full of anecdotes. And it was, many anecdotes changed my life. What's a good one to say in this context? So, when we were working in healthcare, we would go to the government office in Udaipur and say, are there are all these healthcare providers who are not trained. What's your view? And they say, it's an immense problem. We can never find them, because they always, they're underground, etc., etc. So we heard that. About 2 weeks later, we just went to the house of a rural healthcare provider. He was very friendly. He was sitting there in front of his house with a sign saying, doctor, whatever. We asked him, do you have a medical, what's your qualification? And he said, I did my 12th grade exam. I passed it. I couldn't get a job, so I took this job of a doctor. Then he brings out his mark sheet and shows that he has passed. And his subjects were geography, psychology, Sanskrit and history, I think. And so that's what his qualification. He was completely upfront about it. The government claimed that it was impossible to find him. He was sitting there with his degree sheet and his sign saying a doctor in front of him. So I think that I think it's easy to make excuses, but I think if you want to regulate, I think we regulate. We sometimes use the fact that it's a big country and it's very complex, so we don't actually regulate. But I don't believe, for example, that the fact that you can buy steroids in a Kirana store should be that hard to regulate. I think.
Sir, Shreya Chatterjee from Mosaics. Sir, we're at a juncture, I'm also reading the press note of rolling out a national health insurance scheme. However, sir, there is a knowledge gap that exists in giving this accessible healthcare. How do we address that knowledge gap?
Which knowledge gap?
For example, sir, in rural places, a lot of people not even aware about existing ideas.
So, existing ideas about insurance or existing ideas about healthcare?
About healthcare.
I think there is a knowledge gap, absolutely. What we find strikingly in our joint work is that most rural healthcare professionals, including the untrained ones, actually know more than they do, much more than they do. They're really, I think they're very nervous in, if they think that, you need an MRI, they'll never say it because, that's not their job. Their job is to do little things. And so, in some ways, they don't use the knowledge they have, which is one of the additional distortions of treating them as these outlaws. I silenced everyone.
Just a clarification, you said some important changes and some changes is required to deal with banking crisis. Would you elaborate on what kind of changes you would envisage?
No, I have said this for a long time. I think we should be seriously thinking about reducing the equity share of the government in many public sector banks below 50% so that the Central Vigilance Commission doesn't regulate them. Yeah.
What you've done with Liver Foundation, has that also played a role in these choices where government is now engaging in
I don't know. I hope, but how would I know?
That NMC is also part of what we were discussing today.
You may know more about this.
In fact, we wanted to be very focused on, in the context of NMC, how we can reorganize the rural healthcare delivery, and we wanted really to go beyond just availability of doctors, because we feel, and our research that Abhijit and Liver Foundation did together, J. Paul and Liver Foundation, showed that in rural areas, and in fact one of Abhijit's student, Jishnu, who is also a great scientist in Georgetown University now, we found that 80% of the first visits in this country's rural areas are to doctors who are not trained. So the entire context of the meeting was that if that be the scenario in the country, where people don't have access to a trained person like an MBBS person, and if we think that this is not ideal, then under the less than ideal circumstances, should we close our eyes and say, no, let this keep on happening? We felt that, and that's what our work also showed, that if we try to reorganize the things that we have already got in hand, like we have got informal providers, we have got other category of workers also, and if we provide them training, try to integrate them, try to use them for some public health goods, then that can be really useful for the system and also improving the outcome of the system also. There are, significant concerns, debates around this, but we found that, and that's one of the randomized control trials that Abhijit did in Birbhum in West Bengal.
We did together.
Yeah, we did together.
Jishnu Das.
Clarifications of what you have just said. Did you say that the government equity in banks, what exactly did you say?
I said that they, I think the rule, if I am not wrong, is that if the government owns more than 50% of the equity, the Central Vigilance Commission is empowered to investigate every individual default. And that's a paralyzing fact for bankers. So I think it would be better if the equity share of the government goes down below 50%.
For CVC to get that power
to take this power away from the CVC.
You don't want checks and balances in the system?
I think the checks and balances are part of the problem, to be honest. I think these checks are so heavy-handed that they make people either not want to lend, or when they lend and they think there's a mistake, they actually bail out the clients. Because, that way is, if I give you another loan and you repay my loan, then I'm kind of covered. So they keep postponing the loan till it becomes impossible, and then it collapses 10 years later. So we're seeing a lot of accumulated default, partly as a result of the way it's regulated, which is the CVCs are very heavy-handed way to regulate. You want to regulate, RBI also regulates. It's not that it doesn't regulate. So checks and balances are there. The CVC is an additional layer for public sector banks. And we don't see that private sector banks are, necessarily giving, irresponsible loans more than the public sector banks. If anything, the opposite.
I think we've got 10 minutes in hand, and I would request all of you to be really focused. There are hundreds of issues in healthcare, and he has got his ideas and all. So please try to, focus your questions on healthcare issues and poverty-linked research issues that he had been doing. That would be really good, doing justice to his time.
If you allow to ask me the question, all the world is witnessing the slowdown, either from Europe or Asia. If you want to.
You just heard Dr. Chandra. I'm not answering that. Go ahead.
So can you share a little glimpses of your memories regarding the meat-like person of TV, late TV,
No.
in presidency, not as just a father, but as a teacher?
No.
This is probably not the context. Yeah, let's try to be health and poverty linked research focused.
Go ahead.
I'm a physician, and my background is in infectious disease. With regards to NMC, I have mixed views. Yes, it is very important. We cannot be everywhere at the same time, but I am stiff about antimicrobial resistance. And
You're 100% right, but I think what we need to do is, that's why I mentioned regulation. I think the right place to regulate is access to, the recent generation antibiotics and steroids. I don't believe this is impossible to do. In instance, in Delhi, a lot of places, the Delhi state government has enforced it a bit. So you see these people basically, being a little bit scared of, and you could just send somebody and see to buy one of these things, and they ever sell you without a prescription, you shut them down. I really think we should be draconian in regulating. I think we should not regulate too many things. We should regulate the things that are absolutely critical, and access to recent generation antibiotics and steroids is an absolutely critical thing. The regulatory power of the state is not being used right now, and we need to use it.
few days I'll be working in one of the most poorest part of India. In one of the poorest part of India, I would like to ask if there's one thing I could do as a physician to help the people. What should it be?
I think I'm going to let Dr. Chaudhary answer this. It sounds too hard for me, and he knows this. He's been doing this.
It's very difficult to answer. We at Liver Foundation had been working on interventions that could help poor people and underprivileged. So I think one of the areas.
How about TB and leprosy? Let me tell you.
Yeah. No, not that. We had been considering, contemplating work on behavioral changes, and behavioral changes are going to be important areas. So maybe, I'm not sure, you could focus on improving breastfeeding outcomes. Yeah, that would be great contribution for the country, because breastfeeding in this country is a staggering 50% uptake. So somebody who focuses on behavioral changes on breastfeeding, and we discussed this in the morning, and Abhijit and...
ये है ABP News, आपको रखे आगे.